this practice. And just to give you guys a little bit of idea on the line of work and what's required to get to this point, I spent 10 years after high school in college, which is a little bit non-traditional, but most veterinarians take a fairly non-traditional path. The quickest way you can get through is in about 7 years, and that's a pretty focused, pretty demanding approach. So to get through in that amount of time is certainly a challenge. What beyond the schooling part, the work as a veterinarian is fairly unpredictable. It requires a personality that's very flexible and accommodating, particularly to the needs of the animals that we work with, as well as the needs of the clients. And that's one thing that I hear a lot, that I think is a misconception of people that are interested in doing veterinary work, is that they have a love for animals, and that's certainly an important factor, but we spend as much or more time dealing with the owners and people and personality issues that we have to accommodate and work through to help figure out what we can do to best serve them and their animals. And so that's one of the things that I think as people are looking at this career field, that a lot of times gets overlooked. And once they're committed and in school, people have to figure out how to cope with that situation at that point. And some people do very well, and some people do not. And that's one thing that the veterinary field creates a lot of opportunities. So when most people think of a veterinarian, they picture something like this, where they're working in a private practice or a vet hospital, and they're seeing animals and doing surgeries and treating sick animals and those kind of things. And an awful lot of veterinarians work in other lines of that industry. The pharmaceutical industry is a huge location that a lot of veterinarians end up in. There's a lot of research opportunities. Food safety is also another one that's not the typical idea that people think of in terms of veterinarians. So those are just a handful of the major fields. All of those branch and get very specific, and there's a wide variety of opportunities for a veterinarian in the work field. It still requires the same amount of education and sometimes more to be in those fields, and so that's something that I think a lot of people are convinced that once you get through vet school that's it. But a lot of vet school and no matter what type of schooling you go through, it's learning how to problem solve and figure out the information that you need. And so different types of schooling, obviously engineers have a different problem solving and line of thinking than what a veterinarian does or a teacher. But everybody's presented with problems in life or situations, and it's their education and their schooling that helps them to sort through those situations and find the answer. And so that's an awful lot of what education does for you, rather than remembering a specific fact. So, yeah.
Before you go on, Drew, could you just talk about the difference between a small animal and a large animal vet practice, city versus rural, and
Absolutely.
just to give them some perspective on that?
Sure. So this practice here is a mixed practice, and it's closer to a rural practice than what a city practice would be. But one thing in a rural practice, you have the opportunity to see about any kind of animal, and that's one thing that we do here that we're not as focused as some of the city practices, because there's not other options that are readily available. And so when there's a sick rabbit, we can't send you to a rabbit doctor. And so we use what we know and what we've learned to be able to treat different situations, and like I was mentioning earlier. So that's part of being in a rural practice. We are focused a significant amount on doing large animal work. I do an awful lot of cattle work. Dr. Schiller here does an awful lot of equine work, and we certainly overlap in terms of what areas and animals we see. But that's an opportunity for one thing. It keeps your day interesting, because I may work on a horse, I may work on a cow, I may work on a calf, I may work on a pig, goat, rabbit, a duck. Dr. Schiller's a duck expert, but the more focused you get, the more routine things get, and so that's one thing that keeps it interesting for us here, and then of course the seasonal shifts of what work's required keep things interesting as well.
So you mentioned having to deal with people. Would you say that the small animal practice is a more difficult people kind of issue than large animal, or?
I would say they're different. There's certainly difficulties and opportunities to deal with the different situations in either field. So there's just in terms of a big comparison, working with cattle, in a lot of situations, that's their source of income and their way of life. So when we deal with a big disease outbreak or a major situation with those, they have a personal issue because that's their income and that's their how they sustain their life. And so that's a different angle than a pet that's an emotional attachment. And so you look at taking somebody's source of income for a year, that's a pretty major personal situation. So I think there's the potential to have a lot going in either direction there. I want to give everybody else an opportunity to talk. So but one thing, when I was in your age schooling situation, I was not a stellar student, and that's one thing that everybody thinks, that you have to be the top in the class and you got to have straight A's and all that. Absolutely helps, but don't limit your opportunities of where you can go from here because of what grade you got or something like that. When I graduated from vet school, my mom pulled me over to the side and she says, "We were just praying that you'd graduate from high school. We never thought you'd go do anything beyond that." And so there's a chance to move on, and certainly the more specialized and more interest you have in what you're studying makes a ton of difference. So I'll let Dr. Schiller speak some, but there's something I want you guys to consider, because I think a lot of people get down because they didn't have perfect grades or something like that. Set some goals in life and go for it.
So I'm Dr. Marky Schiller. I'm a 2016 Oklahoma State University graduate. Like Dr. Drew, it took me a long time to get through school. I was in school for 9 years. I took a year off in between my undergraduate and vet school to get my Oklahoma residency. And so that proved to be a pretty rewarding experience because it allowed me in-state tuition. So that's something for you guys to think about as you're kind of shaping your career. And I'm going to bounce quite a bit off of what Dr. Drew's already talked about. But does anyone have interests that they know right now of some sort of animal industry, vet med, anybody? Not yet? Okay, well, we're going to change that today. So one thing I will say, if you guys do, if we pique your interest today, we take people to shadow all the time. You can come and hang out with us for the day and kind of see really what we do on a daily basis. And I think the main highlight of our jobs is to be flexible. This morning we both had different plans, and we ended up doing a C-section right in here. So, you know, every day is just changing minute by minute, and so that's one of the really exciting things about this job. And then to kind of bounce off of the mixed animal practice versus a more focused practice like you'll get in the cities, I think it's a really rewarding thing, and kind of what drew my fiance and I to Fort Scott was that we had this opportunity to come into Fort Scott, work in a mixed animal practice where we could work on every animal. Every day was different. Just the community here was one of the main deciding factors for us to move here, was just that we could stay in a small town feel, get to know everybody, get to know our clients. And so I encourage you guys, as you grow into young adults and individuals, that you know, remember that feeling of being home and knowing everybody, because it is really nice. I'm going to turn it over to Opal for a second. She's got a little bit different of a viewpoint. Opal is a veterinary technician, and she went through veterinary technician school, and I'll let her talk about that.
Hi, I'm Opal Heckman. I was born and raised right here in Fort Scott, Kansas, and I graduated from veterinary technician school in 2014 from Colby, Kansas, so way out west, about 6 hours away from here. I always knew I wanted to do something as far as along the lines of animal medicine. Growing up on a small cow-calf operation just here north of town, you know, kind of led my career path into what I'm doing today. So what a veterinary technician is it's like a nurse for animals. You're kind of the doctor's right-hand man. You just do anything and everything they need you to do. My program was 2 years. I know there's some programs out there that are 4 years. Colby was actually kicking around the idea of expanding their program into 4 years. I'm very proud of where I graduated from, but if I had to do it over again, I would definitely you know, recommend doing a 4-year program versus a 2-year program, just because of the amount of information that's shoved it, you know, at you within those 2 years. It's pretty tough at times, but not, you know, impossible. And Colby is not the only veterinary technician program around. There's several in the state of Kansas, and then of course, you know, out of state. But like I said, just you know, what you usually do is just assist the doctor, whether it's in surgeries or just the day-to-day activity, you know, with appointments in the clinic. And so you know, there's several opportunities, not just, you know, being stuck, you know, behind a desk or, you know, something like that. You can assist, yeah.
Could you guys describe like what a typical day looks like for you?
So, and that's another cool thing about veterinary medicine, is that it's not normal. You never know what's going to come through that door, and I think that's something that we all, you know, share a passion for, is that, you know, you just don't know what's going to come through that door. But a lot of like the typical things we do is like routine vaccination appointments, or like just routine checkups to you know, make sure an animal is, you know, nice and healthy, you know, doing okay. We do routine spays and neuters for animals. If you guys don't know what that is, it's so they can't have babies anymore.
What does
We
a
do routine
checkup look
dentals.
like?
So when I go through a routine checkup, just a health check on a pet, I kind of start at the front and I work my way back. We examine every body part and system that we can see or feel. So I start at the nose and I check the teeth and the gums, and that can give us indicators of something going on deeper, or something is straightforward as your pet needs a dental. We go back to eyes, ears, lymph nodes. We examine down the throat. Just do a general whole body palpation, so we feel all the lymph nodes in the body. We can palpate their abdomen and feel some of the organs that are in there. Can trigger some other diagnostics if necessary. Large animal is a little bit different, but I try to think of it in the same way. Just start at the front and work my way all the way back. I think another important aspect of our day-to-day is taking care of our in-house patients. So we offer boarding here as well as surgical patients, small animal and large animal. We've got Abby back here. She is here with an eye injury. So we have been treating her every 2 to 3 hours around the clock. So that's a big part of our day, as well as our routine appointments. And then we also get emergencies and walk-in appointments that kind of shape our day as well.
On the large animal side, that was a fair description of what happens here in the clinic. We also do a lot of field work, and so we'll go out on the farms and we may process cattle or preg check cattle. It just kind of depends on what the season and the time of year for what services we're providing in the field. But some of the bigger operations, we may be out all day long doing the exact same thing, one animal after the next, after the next, after the next. Some of the smaller operations, you go do 10 or 20 cows here and 30 cows down the road, and or come back here and check some small animals or something like that. But it's very unpredictable, and it doesn't take anybody longer than driving out of their driveway and accidentally hit their dog, and that changes everything that we've got going on the schedule right now. So that's something where the flexibility, if you like to have a schedule and you're planning on doing this, and that's, if that changes, it wrecks your day, that's
or your night.
Right, or your night, yeah. So that's the other thing that we're on call 24 hours a day, and so this cow that we did the C-section on would have been at 9 o'clock at night. We'd have been here at 9 to midnight, probably doing a C-section. And if it happens at 2 in the morning, they don't let us pick when they're going to have a problem. So, that's one of the things that we deal with on a regular basis. And from our aspect, it's challenging at times, but we also hope that our clients are understanding as well, because if we have something scheduled and then we have an emergency show up, being able to be flexible and understand that if something's more urgent than what you have going on, we have to shift things around. Just like at the hospital, if somebody has an emergency and you're there for an annual checkup, you end up waiting sometimes.
So Ethan and I are bankers, so you'll understand the question. I'm financing vet clinics. I'm astounded at the investment you guys have made in education, and then facilities, equipment, medications. Can you just talk about the financial side of it? I'm not asking what you made, but
Sure.
Just put that in perspective a little bit.
Right. So starting at the front end of this career path, the education portion is a substantial investment. And you look at putting 10 years or 9 years of your life focused towards one thing, you have a huge time commitment, but you're also it's not uncommon for a veterinarian to graduate with between $200,000 and $300,000 in debt, and there's certainly more extreme cases than that. There's some people that are blessed to the point where they can pay for school as they're going through. That's one of the challenges that new graduates face coming out, is how to manage that school debt. The income for a new graduate veterinarian is around $65,000, $70,000, and that's pretty tough to make payments on $300,000 of debt at that rate and still have some sort of life. Most veterinarians come out and they're taking a job somewhere that they haven't been before. They're away from family. You've got all of your living expenses that you may not have the opportunity to have some support with that. So that's certainly one of the challenges. And then the next step is typically somewhere around 5 to 6 years out of school is the typical time frame that veterinarians start looking at purchasing a practice or buying into a practice. And by far, you haven't got rid of your school debt yet, and you're looking at putting more finances on the line in terms of being involved in the ownership of a practice. Certainly still not considering the fact that that's also the time frame people are typically looking at having kids, and they're looking at buying a house, and they're, well, I drove this old beater car for 20 years getting out of high school and babied it through college, and I'd like to drive something decent now. And you've got all those expenses coming on them, and veterinary practices, depending on what area you want to be, how big of a practice, and those kind of things, it range all over the place in price. But again, another huge investment. Something that's these guys would be, when you start getting ideas like that, you need to have somebody to talk to that has a good, confident background in the financing world, because that's one thing that most colleges do not offer a whole lot of information on. They're focused on the medical part, and there's a lot of medical information to learn and know, but you also have to know how to survive to use it. So, is that cover what you're? Yeah.
And just playing off of that a little bit, that's another huge selling point of practicing medicine here in Fort Scott, is that we're a rural enough area that there are some government programs to work in Fort Scott to help you pay off those student loans, and so that's another really big selling factor. Do you want to talk a little bit about the costs associated with?
Yeah. So, growing up in a big family, and also, on a small farm, sometimes money was a little tight, and so I don't want that to discourage you as far as schooling. I would really highly encourage you guys, fill out all those scholarship applications and fill out all those grant applications that you can. Every little bit helps. So if usually like the typical, and that's just going off of Colby, would have been around, and it's pretty low compared to what they had to go through, but usually around 30 to 40,000, and I was lucky enough to walk away with only 5,000, and that was because I worked hard and I filled out those scholarship applications, I filled out those grant applications and stuff. So I really highly encourage you guys to do that. And also kind of playing off of what Dr. Drew said about as far as different aspects in the career field as a veterinarian, that's also for vet tech as well. You don't have to just be like stuck in a clinic. There's lab techs, there's techs that work in universities. So there's several different career options out there as in tech as well. And I just being in this situation where I was a few years ago, I would just really encourage you guys to find something that makes you happy. If it doesn't get you excited waking up in the morning to go do it, then it's not right for you. I was told a long time ago to find something that was going to make you money quick, and I really disagreed with that statement. You need to find something that makes you happy. So just don't stop until you find something that makes you happy.
You guys kind of touched on this a little bit, but are the two of you from a small town or a larger city, and what drew you to be in a rural area?
Yeah, I grew up in a town that population was just under 4,000 while I was there. It's grown significantly since then. But I came out of school and practiced in another even smaller town, and so that's kind of the way of life that I prefer. One thing that overlaps into the financial aspect is your cost of living. Working in a rural community, your paycheck may not be as big, but your expenses quite often are not as, that's a consideration. And that's, a lot of the veterinarians that we've interviewed and worked with in various aspects, there's a few that flip-flop from a large city to a rural area or vice versa, but your comfort level makes a big difference on where you end up. And I've got several classmates and good friends that are in the Kansas City area that are veterinarians, and it's a different way of life, a different way of practice up there, and perfectly fine for those people that appreciate that. One thing that we talk about are emergency services and being available at any time of day. That's a difference of their practices. They have emergency clinics scattered around through the city, and so when it's closing time, there's another option for people to, if they have an injured animal or a sick animal or something that comes up overnight, and so they're a veterinarian that have set 8 to 5 hours, and I say just different way of life.
Any other questions? Would you guys like to take a tour? All right.